You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives for the Acolyte third episode, Destiny. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and joining me, as always, the Yord to my soul, Joe Hogan.
I make you, and you make me, Mike.
Oh boy, this show is unfreaking believable. um, this episode floored me, and I don't get to watch it like at 6, or at least I haven't the last 2 weeks because the girls have dance, so I'm with them at dance until 6:45. And so and then Crystal and I are watching it together, so I'm also waiting for her to get home.
Okay.
Because it's at a reasonable time. Tuesday night she's usually home not too late, and the girls go to bed pretty easy because they've been at dance all night, so it's not that big of a deal. So we actually have time. She's loving the show, but you were basically messaging me and being like, this is so good, like they're gonna be so mad, all this stuff, while I'm sitting in the car waiting for them to finish dance.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tease you.
No, it was great because it got me so hyped for it, and then
All right, cool.
and then I sat down to watch it, and it was like, oh my god, this is even better than anticipated. And man, my heart was in my throat the whole episode, because it was just, there was so much tension, because right from the get-go it's like, okay, the whole thing's going to be flashback, and we know that this isn't going to go well. We know that this is going to have a challenging ending to it. And you're watching every detail, trying to figure out what's going on and when is this going to turn, and where's the twist, sort of thing. You're kind of waiting for that moment, and it just, yeah, man, it floored me. It was so good. I was on the edge of my seat the entire episode, and it did not disappoint. I loved it so much. What about you? How'd you feel?
Yeah, I went into it already knowing that it would be divisive, because I had seen the people, because I think the people who got screeners got to see the first 3 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And the thing I kept seeing was that the impressions were that you kind of either love or hate the 3rd episode. And the thing that I kept seeing was that, oh well, it retcons lore, and I was like, okay, sure, let's see. But man, I went the whole time, I had a smile on my face. I was like, I am so into this. This is so cool. I love this. It I don't even know how to describe it. It really is cementing this show as so far some of my top 3 Star Wars that's been made since Disney bought Star Wars for me. I don't get it. I know you don't see a lot on your feeds, but I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'm on Reddit. I read YouTube comments. And it's just, people hate this show, man. And I don't, for the life of me, I don't get it, because they're complaining about things that, for example, the Ascension ceremony. I love the Ascension ceremony.
Yeah,
I love the music in this. It was beautiful and awesome and weird. And I was all in on it. And people hated it. And oh, chanting is stupid. And this is dumb. I was like, this is some of the most beautiful music we've gotten since John Williams stopped making Star Wars music. Like,
Mhm.
no shade on Kevin Kiner and everybody else. Like, everybody else does an awesome job, but like, I don't know, man. This show is hitting like this show's report card already is like all A's for me.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
get it. I don't get it.
I mean, I think there's multiple components, and it was unavoidable this week. Like, I go
Mhm.
on Twitter, and it doesn't matter that I'm not seeing. I'm like, Twitter does not suggest those posts to me, right? Like, that's
Mhm.
kind of what I was getting at last week, is that I've curated my feed to the point where Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, they don't give me that stuff anymore. I don't see any Star Wars on Facebook, which is really funny. Like, as far as Facebook is concerned, I don't even like Star Wars. Um which I is so funny to me, because it's one of the only things that I post about. But I honestly, like, I don't post on Facebook that often. It's mostly just my Instagram stuff auto posting to Facebook. So it really doesn't know how to read me, I guess. But it just sends me X-Men, and when I was hardcore into Dragon Ball a few months ago, everything was just Dragon Ball Z stuff, right? Like, it's so funny. Um but this week, because the vitriol is like so intense and it's at such a fever pitch, it it's like sort of bled through, because the people that I do follow are retweeting a lot of it with their like takedowns, or like they've got like screenshots of garbage from other places. So I've seen a lot of it this week. Um and that kind of sucks. It kind of
Yeah.
sucks, because there's a few aspects to the hate that's going on, right? I don't want to dwell on it too much, because I think there's so much great stuff to talk about in this episode. But there's the component of there are engagement bait posters who are literally, they don't actually care. um they're maybe they've convinced themselves that they're upset about it, but for the most part, they are literally just creating content that they know will get rage clicks.
Yeah.
So and like, that's what they're after, right? Because ever since Twitter monetized engagement, with the premium aspect of the platform, right? For those who don't know, like, Elon Musk, when he made the paywall aspect of Twitter, and put verification behind that process, like, you basically pay for verification now, right? When he did that, he also had them add in features so that basically, like, you get money for engagement, for click-throughs,
I
and
didn't
for
know that.
likes, and for comments and retweets, right? So whenever you see a blue check getting retweeted, or like ratioed or whatever, they're making money off of that,
Mm.
which has sort of, over the last year, led to a rise in that sort of engagement content of like there's just rage bait, right? Like, I'm just gonna, what's the thing that what do people like right now, or what are people upset about right now? What can I post that will get people incensed enough to engage with my content? Because that it's like the surefire way. Like anger gets engagement way more than joy,
Mm.
which is just a sad thing about social media. And so they're just exploiting that part of it. So there's that aspect of it. There's also the intellectual dishonesty part of it, which is not it's really easy to attribute that specifically to right wing extremism, right? Like sort of the alt right extremists, because they really love that intellectual dishonesty. But it happens on the other side as well, and then it also happens specifically within nerd culture, with the nerd hipsters, of which there are fewer and fewer every year, I feel like, because it like
Mm.
that trend has kind of gone away a little bit. But there are still some sites that really, really love to lean into that. Polygon is one of the worst, and it's really funny to me, because Polygon, because they have great branding, and because they have a few good writers, although I don't know how many of them are still there, because I really don't engage with Polygon that much anymore because of this. Polygon has a bunch of sort of like nerd hipster, and this is also engagement bait as well, because there's a lot of like liberal dog whistle stuff going on that site as well, where it's like, let's get upset about this just because like it's gonna get people to come. It's white knighting and that sort of thing, right? Like the sort of thing that the alt-right actually like is like accusing liberals of.
Yeah.
But like Polygon engages in it, and I find it really frustrating because a lot of the time it is intellectually dishonest. So they
Mm.
posted a big thing about like a whole article about how the fire in this episode makes no sense because it's a stone temple. And it's like, you are being willfully ignorant and not paying attention to the episode if that's your take, because it there are two things happening there. We'll get into it, but there are two things happening there. First of all, it's an electrical fire. We very clearly see it, like the fire starts and then it travels, like what from OSHA's perspective, it travels through all of the technology inside the temple, right?
Mm.
Inside this building, right? Like we start seeing everything start sparking, and like it's the door bursts into flame because the door is full of circuitry, because it's Star Wars, so everything's mechanized, right?
Mm.
So all, it's an electrical fire, and all of the electrical stuff is bursting into flame, not the stone, not the metal, not necessarily wood,
I I
right?
think there's also something very important to point out with
Yeah.
that. I don't know if you were going to, if you were going to circle back to. I don't want to like interrupt, but earlier in the episode, they hear a sound in that room,
Yeah.
and mother, I can't think of her name, the
Coral.
one who, what is it?
Coral. The
Yes, yes,
Zabrak, yeah.
yes. She like looks to check in there, and we see that like little spark, but it's kind of inferred that like somebody might be in there, like
Yeah.
something weird is going on in there.
So
So
that's the other aspect of it, right? And that's where
yeah.
this is intellectually dishonest, is that
Mhm.
it, like a surface reading of this episode is, don't trust your eyes, they can
Yeah.
deceive you. Like it, like
Okay.
Leslie Headland knows Star Wars as well as we do. Do not doubt it, trust it, right? Like trust that you can't trust her, because her whole thing, like this is a story about the dark side. Everything is going to be deceit. The whole
Mhm.
thing is going to be deceit. That's the thematic element that will tie everything together, I promise you. So that article, like that's kind of part of it as well. So you're seeing that stuff where you've got even people who are not that alt-right intellectually dishonest just choosing to hate everything because it's part of their agenda, right? Like it's part of their we've talked about this a million times, right? Ben Shapiro goes on the internet and says this is woke, everybody hate it, and then they all just say the thing that he said, which was something that was actually like cooked up by a bunch of right-wing strategists in order to further polarize politics in the US, right?
Mm.
And here as well in Canada, but I guess really the whole Western world. But yeah, so there's that whole aspect of it, and then you just have dumb people, like you literally just have dumb people, and I'm gonna practice a little bit of empathy here and say, like, the dumb people are the ones that I'm the least mad at, because it's not their fault. It's not their fault, right? Conservative politicians have systematically attacked the education system in the Western world over the last 40 years in order to create dumb poor people. It's not that they're not intellectually capable of being intelligent, it's that they literally lack the resources in order to have a critical eye, in order to properly engage with a story. So these are the people that are like, I saw a post that somebody like screenshotted and then tweeted, of somebody being like, I really wish that they, because one person was like, "Oh, what kind of Star Wars story? We all hate the Acolyte. What kind of a Star Wars story would you like to see?" And then the
Mm.
tweet underneath it is like, "I'd really like to see a story about twins where they're separated at birth and one is raised to be a Jedi and the other one is raised to be a Sith. I think that would be a really interesting story. And it's like, that's literally what the Acolyte is, guys. Like, that's
Yeah.
literally what it is. So like those people, they literally lack critical thinking skills because they've not been taught critical thinking skills, because they're in a lower income area and don't have access to proper education, right? Their programs have been cut, their funding has been cut, and so they literally are just like, they're not learning the things that they should be learning. And so we have a whole generation of adults, and it's really only been, I think, the last 5 or 10 years that we've hit this point where, you know, because like I said, it's been about 40, it's been since the 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really is our generation that are now adults who theoretically should have the ability to do this. And this has always been the case, but it's just worse, right? Like, there's always been stupid people, and as a result of, socioeconomic stuff, but also just as a result of like getting kicked in the head by a mule, right? But that's a David Letterman reference, if anybody cares to know. But I like, it's so much worse, it's so much more prevalent now, and social media has given everybody a platform. So it's also like, there's a component of like, we don't just have to deal with the village idiot anymore, we have to deal with everybody's village idiot. And the problem is that all the village idiots get together and then confirm the stupid ideas that they have, and then we all have to listen to them as if there's like some unified voice of village idiocy, right? And like, they have like a council of village idiots that gathers every time one of these episode drops, and they're like, oh, like, this is the stupid stuff, right? um so we're dealing with all of that at the same time. And like I said, like, that last group, the dum dums, I have empathy for. I can make fun of them because they're dum dums, but I also have
Mm.
a lot of empathy because they wouldn't be that dumb if not for the fact that, the system just allows them to be stupid, because it's easier to manipulate them and get them to vote for things that are not in their own self-interest if they're ignorant and poorly educated. But then, Star Wars is accessible enough because it's designed for 8 to 13-year-olds, that it the flashy lights and the space, like, all the things that make Star Wars rad, right? Like capital RAD, like all caps RAD, rad. Um, all of that stuff attracts them like moths to a flame, right?
Mm.
Um, and then we have to put up with it. Like this doesn't
Yeah.
happen in certain other fandoms because other fandoms challenge you intellectually, and so they just stay away from it. They just go, that's dumb and boring,
Mm.
right? So we get a lot less of the stupidity in the Star Trek fandom because the Star Trek fandom is geared towards intellectuals, right? And I mean, like, you get the intellectual dishonesty, which has been happening a lot over the last 5 years with Star Trek. And a lot of the like, oh, this is woke, this is, and it's like, it's always been woke, you dum dums. But you get less of the mouth breather takes than you do with Star Wars, because Star Wars is so much more accessible.
Mm.
Um, so it's like the people who are like, this is making me mad, I wish it was the prequels. And it's like, my goodness, you guys, like I said the last few weeks, I love that we've turned the corner and now the prequels are awesome to everybody. But I am getting so sick of people being like, new Star Wars is dumb, why can't it be like the prequels? And it's like, you are the same people that have been crapping all over the prequels for the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, shut your mouths, you are just making yourself look like an idiot. um so yeah, I mean, it is unavoidable when an episode like this comes out, because there's a lot to be incensed about if you are one of those groups of people that I just labeled, right? That I just categorized. um But if you are at all intelligent, or if you're an interesting human being, then you're watching The Acolyte and going like, man, this is some fascinating, awesome, entertaining Star Wars. uh, so I'm very grateful that the people that I consider friends online are all on the proper side of things. Like I look at it that way and go like, well, at least I know I'm in the right crowd. Like because any argument against this show is not gonna hold water to me. Like as far as I'm concerned, it, it is not just one of the best Star Wars shows. This is one of the best shows in the last few years. I think there's been some really great stuff. Like this year alone, there's been some really great stuff like Fallout. I just finished Sweet Tooth. I finished season 3 of Sweet
Oh,
Tooth.
okay, yeah, I've heard good things about that.
Sweet Tooth is phenomenal, and so many people are sleeping on it. There's so much great stuff that we've talked about this year between film and television, and Acolyte is coming along, and it's a slow burn. Like it's definitely like a sort of like a little, hot coal burning ember at the moment, but you can feel already 3 episodes in that we are building towards something that's going to be incredible. Like by the end of this season, I think we're going to turn around and look at the whole thing and go like, my god, that was unbelievably good. And this is coming off of the high of X-Men 97, which is like the best piece of media that I've consumed in probably the last 5 years. Just from week to week being just utterly blown away. And I feel like it's like X-Men 97 ended, and there was a couple of weeks there where it's like, oh man, this is a bummer, it's done. But then Acolyte starts, and I'm like, yes, 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 thank you, thank you, thank you, because I'm back to having something to like obsess over, and for my brain to just fixate on, and not stop the gears turning. I But yeah, let's talk about the core of this. Let's talk about what everybody is pissed off about, because where everybody else is saying that this is a retcon, I call, we're a little bit PG-13 here because it calls for it. I call utter bullshit on that. It couldn't be farther from the case. This is not a retcon. This is a like a confirmation, a doubling down, and an expansion on lore. And that is the conception through midichlorians, right? Like that's what we're driving at. That's what's being implied in this episode, which is that Osha and May were conceived through the Force, specifically through the dark side, right? And the claim that this somehow makes Anakin lesser by virtue of the fact that this has happened before. The other component here is that like they are not only are these twins of virgins, right? If like, which I'm just using sort of as a shorthand because it's like virgins kind of means some other stuff, but I think that by the end of the season we'll be able to sort of confirm that they are in fact divergence in the Force. Um, so not only are they a virgins, they are also a dyad. They are also twins. So they are Anakin, they are Luke and Leia, they are Rey and Kylo Ren. These two characters are actually like, and the point of that, I think what Leslie Headland is doing by combining all three trilogies, sort of like that, the all three of those components, Anakin being a virgin in the Force, right? Luke and Leia being twins, in order to balance the Force, and then Rey and Kylo being a dyad, being connected through the Force. All three of those components thematically within those stories are ideas of the Force, the living Force, and the cosmic Force in balance with one another in order to maintain like the whole, cosmological Force ecosystem, right? Like that's what all of those are. They're actions that the Force has taken in order to balance things, right things, in order to move things along. Now, there's a component in this of what uh Anasea says about the thread, about their perspective on the Force, which is not like, it's when Obi-Wan says, Luke is like, oh, so it controls your actions. He's like, yeah, yes, but also it listens to your commands. That's Obi-Wan being like, we have to, like, we balance it as Jedi, right? Like, we like you want to be listening, but at times you need to push a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Like, the Force can go in either direction. The Force doesn't care about the light side or the dark side, right? The living Force, the cosmic Force, it doesn't, right? And the way that Anasea talks about it is that, like, it's a thread and you can pull the thread, right? So the thread is destiny. It's like there's a whole mythological component to that. Go check out What the Force. There are a million episodes on that, as well as Ty on Wit and Folly talks about the red thread of destiny, or red thread of fate. Um, that connects characters and that sort of thing. So, like, that's part of the thematic thing that's going on here. But, like, there's also, like, this idea of, like, oh, we can pull on the thread, and when we pull on the thread, it we can unravel it, or, like, you could pull the thread to make a note, right? Like a guitar, right? Like, there's a bunch of different sort of analogies that we can attribute to that, but all of it is disrupting the natural flow, right? It's disrupting things. And so that's coming into this component of these twins that she created in order to meet some goal. And I think Leslie Headland is looking at that, at those three sort of main components of, like, the prequel trilogy, original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. She's combined them into these two characters as a way of saying, like, here is where it actually starts. Like, that's the point, is like, this is actually the seed when it was planted, that that like ends up growing into the tree that becomes the Skywalker saga, right? So although Acolyte is completely removed from it, this is the connection. And to me, like, I look at that, and you guys know, listening, this is what I live for with Star Wars, right? When a piece of Star Wars media comes along and allows us to, I said this a ton last week, it allows us to recontextualize, it allows us to look at it through a new lens, and then it expands and grows existing lore, existing canon, and it allows us to now, when we go back and watch that other stuff, see all these new pieces of connective tissue, these threads, right, back to a source point. And I look at it and I go, like, that's what I think that's what's going on here. That's where I'm at right now, is that this is a new source point for the mythology that becomes the Skywalker saga. And there's 100 years for it to sort of become removed from this original source point, but that we then see the ripples of that in the future through Palpatine, whatever happened, whether it was Plagueis or Palpatine or whoever, that potentially contributed to the creation of Anakin, right? And then the twins, yeah, Luke and Leia, and then the dyad of Rey and Ben, right? It to me, like, I love that. It's the way that George would have told a story, right? It's exactly the way that you would have told a story.
Mm.
Um, and it contradicts nothing. It like I said, this is a doubling down. If you're a prequel fan, if you're a fan of Anakin Skywalker, you should be ecstatic about this, not upset. Like, it to me, it is one of those things where I look and it's like, you're like, these people are so hell bent on not liking this because they've been told to not like it, that they are literally missing out on something that will make every other piece of Star Wars lore better. Like, it literally enriches the whole Skywalker saga, just this one episode. Just that one scene, right? Just that phrase being uttered, the two of them back and forth, I carried them, I created them, right?
Mm.
Like that exchange just blows everything up in the best possible way, right? Like it's just like this is it think of it this way. This is the big bang of the Skywalker saga, and it'll be 100 years before there are planets and solar systems and all of that and a galaxy for us to care about. Not that we don't care about this stuff right now, but like that thing, like if you're one of those fans, right? Like all of that stuff that you care about, it all starts from this single singularity, right? Like that from this point. That's how I'm viewing it right now, and as we go, like that might change, because as we get more information I might change my opinion on that, but right now what I'm looking at, what I'm seeing, is that this is the singularity, this is the big bang, this is this choice, Anasaya's choice, this coven, whatever their goal is, which I'll get to that in a second, because I want to hear what you have to say about everything that I just said first. But whatever like their goal is, whatever led them to this point, like that was the genesis of everything about Star Wars that we love. And so, like, I not only is it in itself something that I think is infinitely fascinating and awesome and something to explore, the worth exploring, it also just gets me so excited. We're only 3 episodes in.
Yeah.
We got, like, the season has barely begun, and we've already got these 3 episodes that we could sit and we could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and people have already. And like when we finish the season and we go back and we rewatch this stuff and have more information and can go back and like, it's going to, like, the layers are there. And I'm just there when somebody like Leslie Headland is tapped to do Star Wars, it's in that moment, like it's it's the Schrodinger's cat of Star Wars. It's like this could either be the best thing or the worst thing, right? And I think thankfully we've been spared from a lot of the things that could have been the worst thing, like Colin Trevorrow and Josh Trank having their hands on Star Wars. I think that they would have not made particularly good stuff. Um, but in this instance, like, I'm so glad everything that I carried into this show from having watched Russian Doll, um, that I was excited for. It was like, if it's anything like that, if it's anything like this show, I think we're in for something special, right? Like, all of that has, in these first 3 episodes, like borne out. Like it's all like it's all there. And I'm watching this and I'm going like, the more information we get, the more I'm like, oh, she's just doing that again, but with Star Wars, which is exactly what I was hoping for, because Russian Doll is a phenomenal show. It's so good. The 2 seasons that are just like, they will blow your mind. And already with these 3 episodes, I'm like, yeah, that's where we're at. That's where we're at with this. And it's like, going back and rewatching it is going to be so much fun, because you're going to be like, okay, okay, that was that. Already people have gone back, and I think it's in the 2nd episode. Um, uh, uh, Chimere is eating a spice cream at
Oh, is
one
he?
point when
I
he's
didn't
when he's
realize
like,
that's what that was. Okay.
yeah, when he's like walking through the little area or whatever, he's eating something, right? And if you look, he's eating a spice cream. And so it's like, it's connected into this episode. So
Mm.
yeah, I am so ecstatic about the potential of the rest of this season. But I've talked now ad nauseum. Joe, what do you think about this uh this new revelation?
I'm super into it. I like the idea that um I mean, so right now, until expressed otherwise, my kind of headcanon behind this is, okay, well, it happened before where
Yeah,
someone was able to use the midi-chlorians to create life. Did it in a way that you know, lady Mother Anastasia even says, like, people see our powers to be unnatural. So that's already kind of a thread, if you will, to the dark side, because the dark side has been described that way. And I really like the idea of someone doing it first, and then Plagueis and or Palpatine kind of finding out about it, and like through this Sith, lineage, that knowledge is there, because obviously the Sith are involved in this story. And I actually think, it's just speculation right now, I think the Sith are already involved in this story in this episode. Like,
Yeah.
I'm convinced that the Sith are watching or maybe even manipulating May, or I'm kind of convinced that that sound that Mother Coral heard was like the Sith Lord is in there. Like, we were
Mm.
supposed to think like, oh, the Jedi are in there. I kind of think it's him running around in there. I think he's
Mm.
manipulating things behind the scenes so that when May's left behind, he can be like, oh, the Jedi killed your whole coven. Jedi suck. You should come with me. I'll show you how to do some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's going to be the Apprentice. I think whoever the Apprentice is, quote unquote, we have our theories. I think they were probably too young at this point when May was a child in the flashback. Anyway,
Yeah.
I love the idea that Mother Anastasia did it first, and then Plagueis and Palpatine kind of like took it and ran, so to speak, and just did it in a more malicious, kind of way, that Anakin was created, and it ended up that he was the chosen one and whatever. I don't think it takes away at all from the chosen one and the virgin birth and all that stuff. I think, if anything, like you've said, Mike, it just adds to it. Like, there's just more flavor in it now, instead of just like, oh yeah, it's just this thing that they already knew how to do. When really here, we just kind of see the stepping stones to that, like how it came to be. Like, it isn't just this thing that just happened and showed up, and yeah, they figured out how to do it. I like that there was parts to it before now. So maybe there was something even before Mother Anastasia. I don't know. Like, it's just cool to see, like, oh, there is a lineage to this. There is a progression to this. I think it's really cool. And also, kind of on the topic of the Coven, I now feel like there was more to Tales of the Empire than we initially thought, because the Witches of Dathomir have been a thing since the Ewok movies, right? Like, I think that was their first appearance, and then they were part of whatever expanded universe, and then Clone Wars came along and kind of turned them into the Night Sisters, and then we had like some connections to them in Ahsoka, because now we find out, oh, the Night Sisters are from another galaxy. Okay, that's cool. So their understanding of the Force in the other galaxy is different from the understanding of the Jedi. That's pretty cool. Now we have this Coven who has an even, another understanding of the Force, because it's not like the Night Sisters were using Force pushes and, looked and their traditions are very, very different. So I want to know more about this new Coven, where they came from, and how, are they a like distant sect from the Night Sisters, and they just kind of like split off and did their own thing, like kind of like I'm not sure what the phrase is. Is it Abrahamic religions? Is that what it is? Okay, yeah. Is it that kind of thing where like the split was so long ago that like now they're very, very different, but you could still kind of draw roots back to the same place? And like, we also had in Tales of the Empire the Mountain Tribe, which was, they were super different from Night Sisters, and like their powers were really different, and their outlook on things were very different. So it's just like, man, I want to know more about all these witches. These witches are awesome, running around doing all this cool stuff. And what I really liked about this one, the new Coven, is that I like that there are Twi'leks in there. There's the Zabrak in there. There's like all these, women of different race. It's kind of like I don't know, like this little, they're kind of like a Jedi Order in a way, where obviously much smaller, but they're finding these people from all these different backgrounds, and through their commonality and their connection to the thread, um, they become a sisterhood. And it's super different from the Night Sisters, where it's just like, oh yeah, we're just the Night Sisters from Dathomir, we're a clan. Pretty much everybody here has the ability to be a Night Sister. Where the Coven seems much more, because their backgrounds are so different, it's probably just these Force sensitive women. And there's also a story there that we haven't been told yet. Why are they exiled? Why are they on the run? Why are they in hiding? Other than, they have these kids and they don't want the Jedi to find out about it. I'm just super interested in this. Like, I'm super interested in their background, and I also really like the questions that it raises for, well, why can the Jedi just take these kids? Because, like, I'm the thing that I'm I assume I'm supposed to, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to get from it, but this is so far what I've gotten from it, is that uh this is 100 years before Phantom Menace, right?
Yeah.
The Republic law states that I this is my understanding. Public law is stating that Force sensitive children can only be trained by Jedi, and it is illegal for other factions to be training them or for them to go untrained, because then it's basically like kind of like unregistered guns, right? Like,
Yeah.
the Republic wants people to be uh, uh, registered and regulated if you have Force powers, because they don't want people with Force powers running around causing, trouble, destruction, pain, uh, exercising that power over people that, it would be hurting society more than it would be helping it. So they want to regulate all that stuff. So I understand that. But I think the question that's kind of being raised is it right? Is it morally right to separate children from their families to exercise this law? And Mother Anastasia even says this isn't about, the power. This is about who's allowed to use that power. Why shouldn't these people be able to govern themselves, and who gets to use these powers? Why should it be up to the Jedi, even when it's outside of Jedi jurisdiction? I can't remember the planet name, but the planet was outside of the Republic. What right do they have to even take these children and strong arm uh, the the Coven? Because it's clear that the Coven wants to fight for the kids, but at the same time, they know that they are in a very disadvantageous position compared to the Republic, because if they fight the Jedi, the Republic is then going to come down on them. And it really is kind of, in my opinion, a statement on authority and who has the right to make these rules against these people who have the same power. Why don't these people have the same rights to make up their own mind and make their own laws and their own decisions outside of, this jurisdiction? So I like that it's asking these questions. Like, I like that there is no, you know, like, it's not black and white. It seems very gray to me, because it is a difficult question. Because, like, think about it. Yes, um, the Republic is trying to do this to adhere to this law that on paper is really good, but also kind of raises a lot of questions and kind of yucky situations for these families that are left behind. Like, you just took my child. This is, I'm not Force sensitive or whatever, but like, you're still taking my family away from me. Where before now, it was kind of implied that, like, oh yeah, people who have Force sensitive children, like, it's an honor for their child to go be a Jedi. It's probably really difficult to give it up, but like, I never thought to ask the question, like, well, what about the families that don't want to give up their children? What happens then? Do the Jedi just, let it go? And it really was kind of a strong arming perception I was getting, impression rather, I was getting from Indar, like, hey, we have the right to do this. Yeah, with your permission, of course, but like, we're going to do this whether you like it or not. And we're the Jedi, we're the Republic. You kind of have to deal with it. And I really like that the Jedi at large, except for, we kind of already talked about in the last episode that Soul gets it, right? Soul understands what the Jedi's larger role in the galaxy should be. He's our Qui-Gon for this time.
Yeah.
And he's much more compassionate and like soft and kind about the whole situation. But the rest of the Jedi are kind of like, yeah, no, this is the way it needs to be. This is the way we do it because we know better. And George is the one that established, like, even the older, more experienced ones are too sure of themselves. Palpatine says the Jedi are only concerned with the narrow dogmatic view of, their laws and their rules. Like, Palpatine was telling the truth. Like, I hesitate to like side with him,
Yeah.
but like the Sith like to tell the truth when it benefits them. And in that instance, he's absolutely right. And that's why the Jedi were too blind to see the rise of Palpatine and the creation of Darth Vader, all of that stuff coming a mile away, all happening under their noses because they were so sure of themselves and so sure in, the Republic and the establishment and blah, blah, blah. So that's what I'm getting from this. I don't know if I'm close. I don't know if I'm on the marker. I don't know if like I totally missed the point. But like I really like the larger implications and the uncomfortableness of that entire situation. And clearly the tension between the Jedi and the Coven led to whatever crazy misunderstanding or manipulations from the Sith or May or whatever. Something really bad happened. The Jedi ended up aggressively taking care of or being responsible for the death of that coven. Did not tell Osha the full story. May is left in the aftermath to be manipulated by the Sith, and it's going to come to a head in this season. Like that's my understanding of everything.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. Like I
Yeah.
love this. I love this
Yeah,
story. It's really cool.
I think you're spot on, right? Like, and it's so funny because like I'll say, you know how I can tell that this is really really great Star Wars, as opposed to like Ahsoka that was like really really good Star Wars that we really liked, and like no, this is not taking anything away from that, or Bad Batch, or any of the stuff that we've talked about recently. You just talked for like 10 minutes, like you did. Which usually it's like I'll do that, and then you're like, "Yep, I think you're on something."
I
Like,
have nothing to add.
yeah, but you have all of that. But more than that, I think the key here is that like we're on the same page, man.
Mm.
And I've already listened. I haven't finished the episode of What the Force from this week yet, but I've listened to most of it. I like probably like 75% of it, and they're on the same page that we're on. They're
Mm.
talking about some of the more like deeper thematic stuff and mythological stuff, but in terms of like plot and in terms of like overall meaning for what this means about the Jedi and for the Sith and all of that sort of stuff, like everybody is on the same page, right? All of us who are actually like watching the show, in an intellectually honest way, we're all on the same page. We're all taking the same thing away from it, which, and to be honest, so are the people, like the haters. They are also taking away the right stuff. They're just mad about those
Yeah.
things.
They
So
don't
there's a
just
lot
like
of people
yeah.
who are really mad that the Jedi are being portrayed in this way. The thing about that is that it's like, well, you've only just caught up to the subtext of the prequel trilogy,
Yeah.
because like where it's subtext in the prequel trilogy, although it's not even subtext, because like you say, like you mentioned it, Yoda himself is like, we have a problem in the Jedi Order.
Mm.
This isn't right, and Anakin says it. He said, I'm not the Jedi I should be. And that's Anakin being fed the line by the entire Jedi Order that he's supposed to be the chosen one, and he's supposed to be this and that, and him not listening to Qui-Gon, right? Not listening to
Mm.
his lessons from Qui-Gon. And Obi-Wan being the Jedi that he was towards the end of the Clone Wars, and then the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is the fallout from that, of him realizing, I've been on the wrong path. Actually, the whole order was on the wrong path. And Yoda,
Mm.
when Yoda talks in Empire, and when Yoda talks in The Last Jedi, like that, these are the things that he's talking about. When Luke talks about the Jedi Order in The Last Jedi, this is the stuff that he's talking about, right? So it's like Star Wars has actually been saying all of this stuff for a very long time, right? It's baked right into the prequels, and the Clone Wars went way out of its way to make all of this super clear. And Star Wars Rebels expanded on that, and there's so much of Star Wars that has just been like, hey, look at this.
Mhm.
When Palpatine steals younglings, we consider it evil, but because the Jedi ask before they do it, it makes
Yeah.
it okay, right? And so a lot of us have been discussing that online for the last few years, like really in depth, as we've sort of like looked at the Jedi from the perspective, especially I think of the perspective of Kylo Ren. And The Last Jedi, I think, sort of like blew this wide open and really started this discourse, like in the sort of the main focus of Star Wars fandom. I put just this conversation of but is what were the Jedi doing that led to their downfall, right?
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that this is getting at is that, and I think that Dawn of the Jedi, when we eventually get that, right, the movie, that is who's is it James Mangold that's working on that? I can't remember.
I can't
There's a
on a
director
good day
attached.
I can't remember
Yeah,
director names. So
there's a director attached to it that's working on that, and that's the Dawn of the Jedi is like going all the way back, right?
Mhm.
I think that what we'll see there is that the Jedi were initially an ideology that was spread throughout the galaxy, and so if a child was gifted with the Force, there would be Jedi on your planet, and those Jedi on your planet and their temple, and we see it by the time that we get to Star Wars Rebels. We've seen that, like, actually there were Jedi temples all over the place, and they don't
Mhm.
look anything like the temple on Coruscant. It's
Mhm.
not. We're not talking about the Jedi of the Republic with their outposts and their archaeological blah blah blah. We're talking about the stuff that those outposts were there to uncover, right? We're like the temple on Lothal is ancient, right? It's not. It's got nothing to do with the High Republic. Like, it predates that stuff, right? Um, and is much more akin to something like the Night Sisters or this coven, right? When we sort of look at the iconography and the visual language of it, it feels much more um, uh, spiritual than religious, right?
Mhm.
And so I think like that's what we'll learn, is that that's the way that it used to be, is that like kind of every planet had these vergences in the Force, like the Temple on Lothal or the Vergence, the cave on Dagobah, right? Like everywhere across the galaxy has these points, and the Jedi would be attracted to these points and would set up shop. And as children were born, it's like, okay, well, you'll come and you'll learn at the temple, right? Everybody else, they're going to be farmers or engineers or whatever, but you're going to come and you're going to train to be a Jedi, and we're going to teach you about the Force, right? But you don't have to leave your family. You just, like, you come to, it's like school. You come to
Yeah,
school,
that
you
was
come
cool.
and you train in this, and if you decide to devote yourself to it, then you eventually live in this monastery, and that's the way that it would be, right? And they would be part of the community, and they would be part of everything. And then the Sith happen, right? And the Jedi Sith war happens, and I'm inferring a lot based on sort of Legends canon, right? But we can kind of like start putting this together and go like, okay, so then the Sith Jedi war happens, and that polarizes viewpoints, right? So now we have two schools of thought in terms of the Jedi. We have the Sith and we have the Jedi, and that's the light side and the dark side, and the two don't intermingle anymore, right? The living force is no longer the concern. I Good versus evil is now the concern, and then eventually the Jedi become a part of the Republic, like as the Republic is formed, and the Jedi enforce the law of the Republic, and the Republic enforces the role of the Jedi as the dominant religious ideology of the galaxy, right? And they start using one another in order to control, and they use the power in order to enforce.
Mhm.
And slowly over time, the Jedi cease to follow the light in the way that they are meant to. And on the surface, and I think on an individual basis, that's absolutely what they're still doing, right? An
Mhm.
individual Jedi is still trying to follow the light, and they are still trying to listen to the living force. But as an organization, as an institution, they've become so intertwined with the Republic and with government and with corruption and with power and control, which are dark side elements, that they've actually completely lost their way. So by the time that we get to the High Republic, this is already the case, right? From the High Republic stories that I engaged with at the beginning of it, it was like that was very clear that this was like the beginning of the downfall.
Mhm.
They, they had all of these initiatives, and those initiatives were tied in with the Supreme Chancellor, and like it just like the one hand was washing the other, and so the Jedi were not clean. Their hands weren't clean anymore. They were complicit in a bunch of stuff and involved in other things. And so I think what we're seeing here is the beginning of the move towards take them when they're babies. Just take them when they're babies. If we remove them from those situations, then we can avoid bad stuff, right?
Mhm.
And what is that? That is acting out of fear. Fear that the Sith will return, fear of the dark side, right? Well, if we just I know we're causing pain, I know we're causing heartache, but in the larger scheme of the galaxy, we're preventing bloodshed, right? We're
Mhm.
preventing another war. So you're preventing a war before it happens. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like the stuff that we look at, Hydra and Shield in the MCU, and we're like, that seems like that's the stuff that Cap was like, no, that's bad, right? That's bad. And it's like, well, if you're force sensitive, then you must now become a Jedi. That sounds an awful lot like superhuman or mutant registration to me,
Yeah.
right? Just to use these analogies into the MCU, into Marvel, right? That other stuff that we understand, and we know clearly where we are with that. Superhuman registration is bad. Mutant registration is bad. We know that, right? We have so many stories that make it very clear that those are bad paths to go down. The Jedi in the prequels are the end point of what happens when you do that, right? That's what they've been doing.
Mhm.
These children are dangerous if left unattended. They must come to the Jedi Temple. As a result, you've created a metahuman, superhuman registration. They're all in the system now. The Republic has access to them. The Republic is calling the shots because the Jedi keep saying we serve the Senate, but they don't tell us what to do, right? And yet every time the Senate says go do this, they go do it, right? That's what the Living Force novel is about. Like that's one of the things that it's about. It's one of the arguments that's in it. Again, I still haven't finished it, but like that's one of those things that's at play there. Not coincidental that it came out at the same time as Acolyte. Not coincidental that Tales
Yeah.
of the Empire came
Yeah.
out at the same time as Acolyte, right? Like there are people in the story group paying attention to this stuff and making sure that these things are lining up, and that thematically we've got these through lines. All of this is so obviously one of the points of this story is that it's not that the Jedi are not the good guys. It is that institutional power is dangerous. It's as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the dark side, but it is the dark side because it's insidious.
Mhm.
And I use that term on purpose because George used the homophone Sidious on purpose, right?
Mhm.
The names that he chooses for his Sith lords are very on point. They're very very uh, 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 focused, I'll say, um, because he's trying to get it across to kids. That's the whole point, right? Is that it's like this: a 13-year-old needs to be able to get this. Darth
Yeah.
Sidious, Insidious. It's not that he is. It's not that he's out there flaunting his power. It's that he's behind the scenes
Mm.
infecting everything, weaving his way through. He's insidious, right? And that's the dark side is that way. um I am still on the train that Venestra Rowe is the Sith Lord.
You
She's
think
the
it's her?
master.
That'd be cool.
I think that at some point in the 100 years between where we're at with the novels and the comics and whatever in the High Republic and Acolyte, that the dark side has gotten to her, and it's gotten to her via fear and power and control, right? Like all this stuff that I'm talking about, and it wormed its way in because a lot of the High Republic stories are very tragic, right?
Mm.
Like that's sort of the thing. And she was 16 when those stories started. She's one of the youngest Jedi Knights. Or I think at the time maybe she was 15 when she was knighted, right? So I think at the time she was the youngest to have ever been knighted, or something like that. Or like one of, if not the. Um, and then that era of the Starlight Citadel and all of that, is an era of a lot of conflict, right? Much like the Clone Wars. So I think in the midst of that, being so young, she was turned slowly over time through tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, loss and loss and loss, and heartbreak and heartbreak and heartbreak, right? And eventually the Sith Lord, because there are always Sith Lords, right?
Mm.
Like the Jedi believe that they defeated them all, but they didn't actually defeat them. They defeated the Sith Empire, but then the Sith went into hiding, and Bane created the Rule of Two in order to protect them, and all of that, right? So like there were Sith at that point as well, and at that point, like wherever they are, biding their time, watching the Jedi, because that's obviously the best place to create a new Sith Empire is through the Jedi. And they're going to be the most susceptible to the dark side because they're open to the Force, and if you can just turn them, and like I was saying, about Anakin, and the midichlorians, and it's like we're communicating with the midichlorians, but then when you turn to the dark side, the midichlorians are now communicating the will of the dark side. So it's like if somebody is already listening to the Force in that way, then twisting that and just tuning that away from the light side and toward the dark side as like a radio dial, right? Is going to be easier. So I believe that like the Sith are just biding their time, waiting for an opportunity. And so whoever that was then eventually turns Vernestra Rowe. She eventually finds Chimere, trains him, defeats her master, because that's the whole deal, right? That's how the Sith have like propagated through the eons, through these generations, and with this Rule of Two. And so now we're at this point, and I think you're right. I think that the Sith, the master and apprentice, are somehow implicated in this,
Mm-hmm.
that they have been manipulating things behind the scenes, directly or indirectly. I think whoever sent these four Jedi to Brandok to investigate this coven is fully aware of what they're trying to do. I think that at the moment we're being presented, because I think that there's only one title to this episode. Every other episode has had two. I think we're only seeing May's perspective, or sorry, Osha's perspective in this one. And I think that we might eventually get a different episode called Fate that will be May's perspective. And when we get
Mm.
May's perspective, we'll see what actually, like, not what
Yeah.
actually happened, but between the two of them, we'll be able to suss out what
Right.
actually happened.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that you're on the ball, like right on the money, when you say that the dark side is communicating with her, and that it's the Sith. And I'll bet you anything that it's Chimere, and who is the Sith with the teeth, like, right, the helmet,
But he'd be pretty young too at that point, wouldn't
not
he?
necessarily. We
Mm.
don't know, right? There's a lot that could be sort of unknown, right? Because look at Torben. It's 16 years, right? So it's not actually that long. We don't know anything about Chimere. we don't know if Chimere is human. We don't know if
Mm,
Chimere is actually looks the way that Chimere looks. We don't know
okay.
what other
He
like
could be a
weird
changeling.
Sith things are happening, right? So who knows, right? There's lots that could be revealed. Um I'll bet you anything that Sith Lord ends up being called like Darth Grim, right? And because he's got the grin and grim, and like I'll bet you anything that ends up being
Darth
the name.
Smiley.
Yeah. But I in any case, I think that, or possibly Vernestra is as the Sith Master is the one manipulating things, and we'll learn that as well. But that in the way that Palpatine was manipulating Ben Solo from afar, that the Sith Lord is manipulating May from afar. And so the moment when she's like, well, I'm gonna make sure you never leave, I'm gonna kill you, that it's not real, like she's not 100% culpable in that moment. She's a child being manipulated by a malevolent force, right?
Mm.
And that this is going to be a another one of those rhyming couplets with uh the later stuff. um Man, where was I driving with all that? But like, so like that's, to me, like that's sort of everything that's going on there. And I think like we're gonna slowly reveal that over time. We're also gonna reveal that like you said, like there was more happening. The fire isn't the only thing that destroyed that temple,
Yeah.
right? There was an explosion, and we're sort of, from Osha's perspective, we're led to believe that the fire that started outside her door spread through the circuitry in the building and caused that reactor that we get shots of. I think we see it 3 times, and we see it sort of sparking, and like it's very clearly a reactor of some kind, right? That's powering this. What I think there's an implication that it was like a mining facility at one point, and they've sort of turned it into this monastery temple. um but I clearly that explodes at some point and wreaks havoc. But it is also very clear to me, as we're running, as Soul has grabbed Osha and we're running out of the temple and we see all the dead Coven members, that that's not how they died. Something else killed them.
Mm.
Something else killed Anasea. It was not the fire that killed them, right? And
Yeah,
then we have
like
and then we have the cut, and the cut is like, okay, so they get out of the temple and they're running, and then we cut and Osha wakes up on the ship with this mask on her, and Soul immediately feeds her the story. May started the fire, everyone's dead, right? And that's what Osha, because she's a child at the time, that's what she's been taught to believe. I also think that there's a component that the Jedi may have wiped her memory, right? That we might have a Darth Revan type of situation here of like,
mm.
oh, we're protecting her from the truth. And so there will be a reckoning at some point of like, no, you actually owe me the truth, sort of thing.
Yeah. It's weird that she was running out, and then the next time we see her, she was asleep with the oxygen mask on.
Exactly. So there's all of that. I remembered what I was originally driving at. So we've got all of this stuff going on. We're so focused on the Jedi and Sith component of it that I think that people aren't really looking at the Coven itself. I don't think that the Coven have altruistic intentions with the ascension of these 2 girls.
Really?
I think that they're actually a sacrifice. And
Oh.
I think that part of Anasea's reticence, I don't want to call it reluctance, but it is reticence, right? She's sort of like, there's this component where she's like, well, what if I let Osha leave? And then Coral is like, you can't.
Hmm.
And Coral is a Zabrak. She has the Night Sister accent, which is sort of like that Eastern European nondescript
Yeah.
Russian-ish accent.
I love her accent, man. Every time she talks, I swoon a little bit. I
So
like it.
yeah, so she's a
That's
Zabrak. She's
awesome.
probably Iridonian, right? Like,
Mm.
because I think that that's sort of the implication there, is that Iridonia and Dathomir are like close, and that's why
Mm.
there are Zabrak on Dathomir that are the Night Brothers, and there's a connection there
Mm.
between the Iridonian Zabrak and the Dathomiri.
Yes.
Night Sisters, right? Because the Dathomiri are not Zabraks. They're not.
Mhm.
They're. Uh, I guess they're Perdian, right? They're from Perdia in the
Mhm.
other galaxy. So they're kind of near humans, but not quite humans, as Zabraks are near humans, right? There's a connection there, and I think that Coral might be connected to the Night Sisters, and I think that this coven specifically, sort of to your point of there being all of these different species and then being very similar to the Jedi, I think that this coven may be a conglomeration of belief systems,
Mhm.
and sort of like a catch-all for non-Jedi Force users that don't necessarily ascribe to the light side or the dark side, but that are tied to the living force and don't really differentiate, right? And that's what, sort of what Anase is talking about with the thread. And it's like the Jedi believe in this, and it's like they're very dogmatic. They're very much like, oh, the light side, the light side, the light side. They only believe that there's one path, right?
Mhm.
Whereas we follow the thread, and the thread, leads us towards destiny, and you can pull on the thread, blah blah blah. But the best thing about all of these idiots on the internet being mad about this show is that this is the closest we've ever gotten in canon to Grey Jedi,
Yeah.
and they're out there going like, this is dumb, and it's because it's a bunch of women, particularly led by a woman of color, so like they're all triggered by that because of the woke red pill nonsense that they've been fed by conservative media. So they're literally like they as I talk about, like dumbing down the masses in order to get them to vote against their own self-interest. They've literally been fed these lies by conservative media and right-wing extremists, to the extent that like the thing that they've been asking for, they cannot see, they
Mhm.
cannot actually even like conceive it, because what we're getting here is a character that is very much like Vergier from New Jedi Order, right? Who's like, the Jedi and Sith are both wrong, the Force is more complex than that, right?
Mhm.
Like, and so we're actually getting that, like we're getting the sort of like the stuff that leads to Darth Caedus and all of that, right? With Jason falling to the dark side in that. So I I think that they are up to something more, and I think they the Jedi are aware of that. How they became aware of that is the question. And I think what we will learn is that Vernestra is the one who sent them, because I still think Vernestra's on the council. I think that that's sort of the implication. She sent them, but she kind of like did it herself without the approval of the rest of the council, and it's sort of like keep all of this quiet, right? Like we're gonna deal with this problem before it becomes a problem, but the council won't agree. But that she knows she's picked these four Jedi for a reason, right? But what she didn't count on was Soul's compassion, and but like she kind of picked him because he's like, so she could manipulate that compassion, but it'll actually end up being the thing that ends up with her being found out, right? Because that
Mhm.
compassion and that love towards Osha is what's going to end up being the thing that undoes everything. Because that's what we'll learn, is that like that compassion, that love, that light side component is the thing that will undo Vernestra specifically, but not the plan of the Sith, because it'll like this will continue through until the Phantom Menace, right? And the long plan, the long game is still going to work out, and they're going to win. But in the short term, Vernestra's own plans aren't. That's where I'm at. That's what I think is going to happen right now. We'll see if
Mhm.
I'm right. But I whoever it is that's sent them here has sent them with the with dark intention, um and they've been manipulated, but then also like the coven is going to manipulate them, because there's stuff that we've seen in the trailers. I don't want to go into it in detail because some people might not have picked up on this stuff in the trailers, but if you want to go investigate, I would just say to look at the end of this episode. Torben has the scar that we see him with later, when we like from last week. We see he's got that scar over the eye. He has it at the end of the episode. He's standing in the background. It's kind of tough to make out, but it's there. So something happened. There was a conflict, and there's a scene in one of the trailers that sort of leads us to believe what that conflict is. There's also one shot of a character in particular that will lead us to sort of how that conflict goes down. And there was a foreshadowing of it in this episode, but it's a red herring foreshadowing. I think it's a misdirect, and that's when Coral sort of takes over Torben's mind for a second, right? And his eyes go black.
Mm-hmm.
That's a misdirect. I think that when we get the other half of this story, when we get the other side of this, there might actually even be more than the two sides. We might get 3 or 4 sides of this story. It might be what the entire season is. It's just us continually, returning to Brandok and learning more about what happened. But yeah, there's a lot more to this than what this episode showed us. We already know that this isn't speculation. This is academic. That there's a lot more going on here, and that we don't have the full story yet. This show's fantastic. This show is so good from top to bottom.
I want to binge it so bad.
I can't believe how good it is, except for the fact that like it's exactly as good as I was hoping that it would be. Like, it's just, I feel very good about myself having gone and watched Russian Doll, and then really paying attention, because I only watched that show once I knew that Leslie Headland was making this show, right? So I was like, okay, fine, I'll watch Russian Doll. Everybody's been saying to watch it, so I'll go watch it. And I watched it very much with the eye of like, what's she gonna do in Star Wars? And so all of that now like coming true, it just feels very good. It feels very, very good for me. Because I was like, yeah, everything that I hope for is coming to fruition, and the wait between weeks, the wait from Tuesday to Tuesday is just, it's painful. It's painful, but thankfully there are lots of great podcasts, and there's lots of great conversation online in order to sort of keep us going. And the Star Wars social accounts are taking full advantage of it with the Yord Horde and all of that stuff. So it just, I don't want to say it. But I'm going to say it anyways. Maybe Star Wars is back. I don't know. Star Wars is back. Things feel really good. It's been real dark since post TLJ, right? There's been like this back and forth between the fandom menace and the rest of the fandom has been really rough. And there's been a lot of like bad things that have happened. There's been a lot of fallout from that. Stuff that has like directly affected us, and that it has sucked. It has not been great. There's been a lot of division in the fandom, but I feel like Acolyte is so good, and that Lucasfilm is embracing it so much. And I think this turn started with Obi-Wan Kenobi and the way that they supported um, Moses Ingram, and that when the vitriol was happening online with that, and then like through Andor and Ahsoka and all of that Lucasfilm is now like, no, we stand behind our stuff. And I don't know that they're ever gonna like make statements and stuff like that like a lot of people want them to. I think that they're just going to stand behind their actors and the choices of their creatives, and promote the hell out of it, and then like celebrate the part of the fandom that they want to cultivate, which is folks like us and the Yord Horde and all of that stuff. I think that's what we're seeing, and so that's where I say like it really kind of feels like we're back. It feels like, yeah, that nonsense is happening, but it's happening in the background. And whether it's what Ewan McGregor said when the racist misogynist stuff was happening with Moses Ingram, and he was like, you're no Star Wars fan to me, like whether it's that sentiment or it's what Leslie Headland said before this series started of like, like if racism, bigotry, the hatred, stuff like that, you're not a Star Wars fan if that's the stuff that you're promoting. I think like we're kind of at that point now where it's like, just what we need to do is stop giving them oxygen. And I know we've done that a little bit on this episode, but we tried to minimize it as much as possible. And I just want to like continue to say that to everybody. It's just stop giving them platforms. Stop retweeting their stuff. Stop screenshotting it. And like, you're not being clever. They're still getting the engagement that they want, right? Like, you're still feeding the fire. You're still giving the flames oxygen. Stop. Just stop talking about their crappy perspectives. There's so much great stuff to talk about. Let's just focus on that. Let's just focus on that. Let's just stay. And it's not about being positive at all costs. It's just about blocking out the hate and the bigotry and the fascism and all of that stuff that's going on. Because, there are other times when we should be dealing with that and we should be acknowledging it. But honestly, I think that Star Wars, Marvel, pop culture stuff, it's a distraction from the real things that we're supposed to be talking about. It's a distraction from things like what's happening in Gaza, right? As we've talked about, like it these are smoke screens. It is really funny. Acolyte started, and a lot of the people that were being vocal about things in Gaza kind of went a little bit quiet on that, because now we're all talking about Acolyte, right?
Right.
They use it against us in order to like literally distract us from things that we should actually care about, the things that the alt-right extremists and fascists, like their goals. They now get to go and do that because we're busy arguing about Star Wars, right? That was the whole point with Russia and The Last Jedi. They literally used bots in order to piss off Star Wars fans, in order to create division, in order to further polarize things so that they would have like pro fascist sentiment in the United States. Now I think know, we can look at it and go like prepping for an invasion in Ukraine so that they would have people on their side in the Western world, and that it would be an argument instead of the Western world going, that's not okay, right? So it's like, don't be manipulated by it. I think it is my thing. Is like you have to see through it. It's, I don't know, the lesson that they're trying to teach in this show about the Sith and about the dark side, and what George tried to teach us with the prequels about like, don't pay attention to the rhetoric. Try and figure out, like, uncover what's underneath all of that. That's the cause of it, right? Where is the rhetoric coming from? What's the purpose of it? But yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever really get rid of it in terms of like within the fandom, but for me, I look at it and I go like, we have to stop giving these guys so much oxygen. And I can say guys, when I say guys, usually I mean that in a non-gendered way, but right now I mean it in like, it is mostly men. It is mostly men. White men specifically, but not exclusively, but mostly. So it just, yeah, we gotta just stop letting them take over the discourse. There are better things to talk about with this show than a bunch of people who don't want to understand what the show is about. I'll get off my soapbox now. I think that does it for the episode.
Yeah, I think we're there.
I guess all of that to say that this was a great episode. And I like, to my point, I would rather talk about the fact that it's a great episode than talk about all of the other nonsense, and stay focused on that. So I think this is the thing. Unless something like truly noteworthy happens within that discourse for the rest of the season, I think that you and I are just going to avoid it. We're just going to
I have no desire to engage with it. I mean, this does not include you. I don't care about anyone's opinion. Like, I'm so tired of people having opinions. People TM having opinions about Star Wars. Like, I don't care anymore. I really don't. Which I know is like a silly thing to do on a podcast, because like, why should anyone care about my opinion?
Yeah.
But like, I'm just so burnt out by
it's the people
thing.
It's the people that need to have an opinion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas like I think what And I think it's one of the things of like the evolution of what this show has become, as it was, like I started off with one thing, and then you and I did Ahsoka, and and I had done Obi-Wan with Marty and whatever, and it's like what am I doing with this podcast? Like, what are we trying to do? And you and I having the rhythm that we have, and the sort of the way that this podcast has evolved naturally, organically, has become less about, I think, trying to be part of like the larger discourse. We're not, because like we don't have that listenership. We're not part of like that, right? That whole thing. I don't think we're moving the needle very much with our conversations. But what we are doing is just like, especially with our topical stuff, when we're not doing these recap episodes, but with our topical stuff, is that like we're just trying to recreate hanging out with friends talking about Star Wars, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's really all I care about.
so to me it's like yeah, like I think, and that's where it's like we're making a concerted effort with this season of Acolyte to get away from that sort of nonsense, because I think what this has become is like Joe and I have Star Wars stuff to talk about. You're either in or you're out. Right? Like, and if you're out, that's fine, whatever, it doesn't matter. Joe and I are going to have these conversations regardless. So like, come hang out with us.
Yeah.
This is literally one point of view, right? And like, I'm very obviously vehement about my point of view, and I tend to present it in a way where I'm like, it's a declaration and not a question, right? But that's just the way that I communicate, and it's just the way that I engage with this stuff, right? So um but at the end of the day, like, I'm fully aware that like how I feel about Star Wars is not going to be how everybody feels about Star Wars, and I know that you feel the same way. So when you say it's like I don't care about other people's opinions, it's like, it's not like everybody is fully, valid in having an opinion.
Yes. Thank you for
Um
clarifying that.
but it's not like, for us it's like, that's not what we're here to discuss. We're not here to
Yeah.
discuss your
Yeah.
opinion of Star Wars. We're just here to give our perspective, and that's not, when I called it forced perspectives, it was just a funny pun that I thought of. And but like, it has slowly over time become the idea of like, no, these are just like, these are our perspectives on Star Wars. So like, either, like I said, like, either you're in or you're out, and it doesn't make a difference to us because we're gonna be here regardless. I so yeah.
I also enjoy talking with you because a lot of times I will either not have an opinion on something, or have just not figured out how I actually feel about it yet. And a lot of times talking to you, I kind of work through it. And
Yeah.
I like getting to, you know, settle on my feelings that whole, because like sometimes your opinion will actually make me disagree. Like
Yeah.
you kind of say more, I mean, more often than not I think we agree, but I think sometimes hearing you kind of spell things out um will kind of put things in a way that I'm like, well, I don't know if I agree with that. I think I'm kind of leaning the other way. But
Yeah.
either way, isn't it nice to agree and disagree and still be friends? And
Yeah. Well, I
isn't
mean,
that
I
neat?
think at the end of the day, as long as our core values
Yes.
are still
Yeah, true.
aligned, right?
True.
Then that is an easy thing to do. To
Mm.
just like, yeah, we're all allowed to see these things from different points of view. That's
Mm.
one of the lessons of Star Wars. I would say it's one of the core aspects of this show, is that our own perspective is going to color the way that we see a specific series of events, right?
Mm.
That's very much thematically what's going on in the show. So it's yeah, having this discussion as part of it, I think is actually an organic thing. But yeah, I awesome episode. I so much to continue to think about and to revisit as we go through the rest of the season, which I'm just, as I've said, I'm so excited for. Um, yeah, man, this show's great. Anybody who says otherwise, you just don't need to listen to them. Like, it really is just a signal to turn off that channel, and not revisit it. To me, like, and that's what I've done. That's why I say like, just block, man. That block button, the mute button, all of that stuff is just so fantastic because it's
Yeah.
just go away, you know. Yeah, I and that's perfectly fine when it comes to Star Wars. It's not great when it comes to like real world political stuff. I think we need to be paying attention to both sides of the aisle in order to, know what's going on in the world, when real lives are at stake, and and there are actual issues. But when it comes to something like Star Wars or Marvel or DC, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's
Mm.
necessary to entertain the other side of that argument, because it's just so much of it is intellectually dishonest and coming from places of bad faith. So just disengage, and I think if everybody does that, like, I really believe that if everybody did that, you'd have a lot of people who, if they're not getting the attention that they're seeking, will start to change their tune,
Mm.
because they're just blowing whichever way the wind's blowing, right? And if the winds change and they're not getting attention through that avenue, they'll literally start to change their opinion in order to get attention a different way. And I would consider that a win. I'd consider that a win. But yeah, that's it for this one. Before we go, Joe, I ask you what's going on with you almost every episode, and you're kind of like nothing. But I know for a fact that you've got a bunch of new prints and stuff like that. So why don't you tell people where they can check out your new Star Wars art
Oh, well, thank you.
that's out there?
Yeah, so I have two new releases. One was a couple of weeks ago. Another one is actually today, right now, at the time of recording this. Uh, Imperial Might is the first one, and it's featuring Darth Vader and Thrawn and stormtroopers and snowtroopers and AT-ATs and a whole bunch of cool Imperial stuff. And the other one is Hello There, and that one is kind of my love letter to Clone Wars Obi-Wan, to James Arnold Taylor's performance, and it's just kind of highlighting all of the moments and characters from Obi-Wan's story in the Clone Wars. Hello There is the one that came out today. Both are $60 and can be found on darkinkart.com or Acme Archives Limited. And yeah, they're both limited editions. I believe Obi-Wan is 295 prints out there, and Imperial Might is also 295. I don't come up with how many they're gonna do. Acme decides how many of each print that they're going to do. But yeah, the reception for both has been really, really awesome, and I'm really excited.
That's awesome. And they're great prints, so everybody should go check
Thanks,
those
man.
out. And
One of my favorite things that has come about from doing stuff for Acme is that I have another Clone Wars one that has, like, the kind of the main cast of the Clone Wars, and constantly people are like showing me pictures that, like, oh, I went to a convention this weekend and I got, Matt Lanter, Ashley Eckstein, D. Bradley Baker, and James Arnold Taylor were all there. So I got all four of them to sign your print. Like, and then and then James, like a week ago, texted me, "Hey, I'm signing your print," and sent a picture of him signing that same print. And I was just like, I love this. I love being a Star Wars fan. This is the best.
that's awesome. Yeah. So everybody definitely go check that stuff out, because it's great.
Thanks,
It's great.
man.
You're really good at making drawings, Joe.
Thanks, man.
Um,
You too, but I will not. I will not talk about what you are working on behind the scenes right now, but oh my god, I'm very excited to get my hands on
yeah,
Blank, and I think everybody else will be excited when they see them
I
too,
think
because
so
I
too.
think they're a great idea. Let me tell you. Let me tell
Um,
you guys, something cool is happening from Mr.
hype
Michael Kelly.
everybody up. Hype everybody up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go check out my Instagram or my TikTok to
yeah.
see those. At
Oh, are you
Archangel
teasing them
Wolf.
already? I haven't seen them. Okay. I have
Yeah,
not been
yeah,
on
yeah. I
his
did.
thing at all.
I did a post of the sketches
Okay, cool.
on both. So, but it is not clear what they are for. I've just said
Okay,
that it's a
okay,
project.
okay.
But yeah, at Archangel Wolf, ARKANGELWULF on Instagram, and Arkwolf on Twitter, on Twitter as well as TikTok, ARKWULF.
Guys, they're gonna be awesome. They're gonna be really awesome. I'm really excited.
Yeah, if they come out the way that I want them to, I think it's gonna be really cool. But stay tuned for that. Check out those channels for that. And when they're ready for release and when I can put them up on my store, I'll let everybody know. But yeah, awesome. Well, that does it for this episode. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and definitely, hey, if you want to like get in on the conversation, join us on Discord. ThunderQuack.com/Discord will take you to the invite, and then you can join the server. And yeah, we've got an awesome community over there of like, the great thing is that it's very much like our conversations. We don't always agree on everything, but everybody there is super awesome, and like everybody's hearts are in the right place. So
yeah, 100%.
So we just have like nice civil discussions about things, but mostly it's just meme posting and giggles and stuff like that over on the server. So it is my favorite place on the internet, but that's probably by virtue of the fact that I have crafted it over the last 16 years. So to just be the cool people that I like, and the sort of stuff that I like to post about. But I'm a little biased, I guess, but yeah, it's a great community, so you should join us. But other than that, we will be back next week with another episode to talk about the Acolyte. So we will see you guys then. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV, and join us on Discord at ThunderQuack.com/Discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/ThunderQuack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network.